On today's show, a wild NBA trade deadline is in the book, so we get together and take stock of what's a new look NBA and break down every big trade at the deadline and decide if there should be new favorites for the championship. All of that and much more on today's Locked On NBA. It is Locked On NBA Friday. I'm Wes Goldberg, joined by Adam Mares, and we come to you every Friday here on the Locked On NBA feed, however you might be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. We're here to recap a wild trade deadline that saw something like 20-something deals get done, Adam. I think we just got to go through all of them and just break all the big ones down. The biggest one still is the one that occurred in the witching hour of
Yep.
Wednesday night, Thursday mornings that saw Kevin Durant go from the Brooklyn Nets to the Phoenix Suns in exchange for 4 unprotected first-round picks, a pick swap, Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, Jay Crowder. The Nets later flipped Jay Crowder to the Milwaukee Bucks. We'll get to that here in a second too. But just your thoughts on when you saw that Kevin Durant had gotten traded to the Phoenix Suns and how this changes things in the West.
I mean, it changes everything. This is a big move. Kevin Durant's one of the best players in the NBA. He has an argument for the best player. I don't think many people are making that argument right now, but they might be when the playoffs roll around, depending on what the Phoenix Suns do. It's a big move. I actually think, despite the fact that this is a no-brainer move for the Phoenix Suns, that it's actually a trade of good value for the Brooklyn Nets. You know, they get 4 unprotected first-round picks that extend, by the way, for the majority of the upcoming decade. So this is a thing that will be paying dividends long after the Kevin Durant era in Phoenix expires. But then they also get 2 players who are extremely valuable in Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson. Now, are they valuable to the Brooklyn Nets? We'll see. We'll see how long those guys are there. But even if they are not, we are seeing the type of draft capital that is expected for 3-and-D type players. They fit the mold of both of those guys fit the mold of that. So I think it's good return. But despite the fact that Phoenix had to pay a hefty price, you get to pair Devin Booker, a top 15 player in the NBA, with Kevin Durant, a top 5 player in the NBA, to go with Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton, who are phenomenal. It's a great trade.
They didn't have to get rid of any of their 3 best players. I mean, maybe people would have put Mikal Bridges over DeAndre Ayton, but that's splitting hairs. They didn't have to get rid of anybody. I mean, this feels like I mean, they got rid of Mikal Bridges, they got rid of Cam Johnson. Those definitely hurt, and they
were huge pieces.
Huge pieces. And look, they lost all their draft picks, and this is a classic new owner, Matt Ishbia, reportedly telling James Jones, the general manager there, in the middle of the night, called him at like 11 p.m. and said, "I don't care, just get the deal done, give them whatever they want," because there's a new owner and he wants to bring in Kevin Durant. It's pretty important that he even got control of the team before the deadline from Robert Sarver to make this deal done, because we didn't know that was going to be the case, right? When this sale initially went through. And boy, did that decision have a huge groundswell effect on what the NBA looks like now. In terms of the Brooklyn Nets, they kind of are now Utah Jazz East, in that they sold off all their top players, got whatever they could in terms of draft capital. But not only did they get all the draft capital, they've now gotten good young players that they could flip down the line too. They already just did it with Jay Crowder. They got 5 second-round picks for him. People might just be like, who cares about a second-round picks, whatever. I mean, 5 is a lot of second-round picks. That's a lot. So that's good stuff there. And they're just going to keep doing it. And they're probably going to, obviously they'll explore all that in the offseason. But now they have a full, half of the season here, a little bit less than that, to kind of see, all right, who's sort of core pieces, who's not, and then we can sort of revisit trades in the offseason when teams are looking to bolster their own rosters. So it's good for it's good for the Nets. I'm sure they would prefer that the Durant, Harden, Kyrie Irving thing worked out.
Right.
But in terms of an alternative, they're way better off now than where they were at the end of like the KG Paul Pierce experiment.
Right.
So
I mean, if we spend just a second here on the Nets, them not owning their own pick and now have that being the pick swaps with Houston is a weird wrinkle in all of this, because you might be inclined to say, just tear it down, it's time to tank, whatever. But they're actually de-incentivized to do that because of their previous moves to get James, to the Harden move and some of the other deals. So I look at it now and I think they do have these players that have more value to them, in my opinion, if you start to rebuild, unless you get a star that we don't foresee going to Brooklyn. Then I do think that they have a very busy summer and will probably get a lot of draft capital and future assets for the players on their roster. But they are also in limbo mode right now. they might still be a playoff team by the time this is all said and done in the Eastern Conference, just based on the amount of wing depth
Yeah.
they have and good players they have. So they're still good. I think if this trade request from Kevin Durant would have come sooner, if all of this would have fallen off sooner, maybe they would have handled everything a little bit differently. But we got to go
They have
back.
they have a pretty good cushion, just to finish that thought, though. They're 6.5 games out from number 1. They're not gonna get that in the Eastern
Yep,
Conference, but they have basically a 6, 7 game lead, uh, before they're even falling out of the play-in tournament. So there's enough of a
right,
cushion where even if they just go 500 or maybe even worse through the
right,
rest of the year, they'll probably at least be in the play-in tournament. But
right.
yeah, go back to the Suns.
But we got to go back to the Suns, yeah, because the story really is about them. I
It
mean, they
is.
are 30-26 right now. Kevin Durant is still out, with his knee injury and won't be back till after the All-Star break. And who knows, maybe not even immediately after the All-Star break. The biggest thing that this trade did was they lost to their depth. You lose two starters, you get one back, albeit a phenomenal one. But if they're going to be without him, I'm just so curious to see what happens with Phoenix the rest of the year. The season's sneaky. There's only 25 games left. We're closer to the end than people realize. How high can they climb in the standings, especially when we know KD will miss time and we know any injury to any of their starting players will leave them pretty thin? That'll be an interesting thing to kind of monitor. I wouldn't be surprised if they were the 3 seed in the Western Conference when it's all said and done. I also wouldn't be surprised if they were a play-in team, albeit extremely likely to win in the play-in. But it's another wrinkle here that we might be looking at teams like the Warriors, who are without Steph, the Lakers, who just retooled, and the Suns all being in the play-in. It's just a little bit more likely than I think anybody would have anticipated.
Getting TJ Warren back in that deal was really big for their depth, right? You get a forward that's probably going to come off the bench. I would imagine it's Torrey Craig that starts at the 3 for them, Kevin Durant at the
Yeah.
4. TJ Warren comes off the bench as sort of your sixth man. Damian Lee's been really good for them this year. They've got guys,
Yeah.
maybe there's something that they could do on the buyout market. We'll see. Certainly, Matt
For
Ishba's not
sure.
afraid to spend money here, so that's another thing to look out for. But it will come down to health, right? Like, we're not breaking news. Like, Kevin Durant is 34 years old. Chris Paul has his history of injuries in the postseason too. But now, and we already saw this at the beginning of the year, if one of Chris Paul or Devin Booker go down, doesn't really matter what the Suns have, even with Mikal Bridges. I know Cam Johnson missed a bunch of time too, but without one of those guys, they kind of just don't really have anything, and things tend to fall apart. But now that you have 3 legit stars here and guys who can run offense through, if one of them goes down, you could still feasibly have a good offense. If Chris Paul gets hurt, you still have Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. That's a pretty good offense no matter what. So we'll see what happens here. But is this, in your mind, you cover the Denver Nuggets. They're number 1 right now in the Western Conference. Does this, at least just from a roster construction standpoint, we'll see what happens with the records shakeout at the end of the year, but are Phoenix right there now with Denver as the number 1 team in the West?
I think they're the number 1 team by themselves. I mean, they've got this move, to me, makes them the favorites, not just because on FanDuel right now they are the favorites to come out of the West, like
Yeah.
Vegas has them that way. But I think that you just have to look at a team's ceiling. And as thin as they are, they do have mid-range scoring and one-on-one scoring, which in the playoffs becomes so increasingly valuable, and in particular in the clutch. If you're able to be able to get to your spot at the elbow and elevate and get a 60% jumper off, well, they've got 3 guys that are the best in the NBA, maybe number 1, 2, and 3 at getting to those specific spots. Kevin Durant, Chris Paul, and Devin Booker, maybe in that order. And it's just so hard with the way that the NBA is designed right now to take away the paint, take away the 3-point line. When you get into the clutch and you have guys that are just so efficient from those spots, it makes it almost impossible to guard. The one thing I'll say, though, what are the division of responsibilities going to be? Because one thing about Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges is it was very clear what their roles were, and
Yeah.
they were very happy to do them. I think that there's always some player who has to take a back seat offensively, or at least a second, sit in the passenger seat offensively, and maybe up the defensive responsibilities a little bit more. And, we'll just have to see how that plays out over the course of a playoff run.
The 2 guys we're looking at, right? Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton. Chris Paul, this is part of why you make that trade. It kind of felt like he was going into another stage of his career here. So you get Kevin Durant in there to the scoring, but Chris Paul, at least what he could do is like a communicator on defense and things like that is important. And then DeAndre Ayton's got to be okay with just sort of being a roll and cut big who protects the basket, which is, you hear reports around that team. That's kind of been the knock on him.
Yeah.
All right, we got another huge deal affecting another big time Western Conference team, the Los Angeles Lakers. Maybe you've heard of them. We'll talk about whether or not getting D'Angelo Russell, Jared Vanderbilt, and Malik Beasley changes things. Did they save their season with this trade? That's coming up next here on Locked On NBA. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. The average person has around 12 paid subscriptions. Think about that. If you think that you're only subscribed to a handful of services, you might want to double check. With Rocket Money, you can quickly identify and cancel all of your unwanted subscriptions. Rocket Money, formerly known as Truebill, is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills all in one place. Over 80% of people have subscriptions that they forgot about, like that streaming service that you bought just to watch that one show or that free trial that you never even used and forgot about. Rocket Money will quickly and easily identify your subscriptions for you so you can stop paying for the ones that you don't want. Simply find the subscription you don't want and then press cancel, and Rocket Money will cancel it for you. No more long hold times with customer service agents or tedious emailing back and forth. Rocket Money makes canceling subscriptions as easy as a click of a button. Over 3 million people have used Rocket Money, saving the average person over $720 a year. So stop throwing away your money, cancel unwanted subscriptions, and manage your expenses the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/lockedonnba. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedonnba. Rocketmoney.com/lockedonnba. Let's talk about the Lakers. All right, let's just break down the deal here. They get D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, and Jared Vanderbilt in a three-way deal that included the Timberwolves and the Utah Jazz. The Timberwolves get Mike Conley, so they get the point guard upgrade, the sort of adult point guard, kind of traditional point guard that they had been reportedly looking for. They get a couple of second-round picks coming from different places. And then the Jazz get Russell Westbrook in exchange for all that salary. Juan Toscano-Anderson, Damian Jones in there as well, plus a 2027 first-round pick from the Lakers with top 4 protections. The Jazz are expected to buy out Russell Westbrook, and Westbrook will do the buyout thing here in the next few days. But in terms of the Lakers, you got D'Angelo Russell now as the point guard. Malik Beasley, a shot maker who will either start or come off the bench for them. Jared Vanderbilt, high energy rebounder, wing, big man, defender kind of guy, versatile, the kind of player that you want next to LeBron James. I think universally speaking, I've seen nothing but praise for getting Beasley and Vanderbilt in terms of fits next to Anthony Davis and LeBron. But people have been sort of, either in or out on D'Angelo Russell in terms of his fit on the Lakers as a point guard. Where do you land on this?
I mean, where I land on it is that the Lakers were drawing dead. I mean, they had where they were prior to this move was a 0% chance of winning in the playoffs. I mean, even with LeBron and Anthony Davis, that team just wasn't doing it. So any move, almost any move was going to put them in the positive direction. And then you look at what does D'Angelo Russell do well? Shoot the ball. I mean, he passes well, he does some other stuff, but really shoot the basketball. Malik Beasley, same thing, a perfect tailor-made LeBron James floor spacer in that he's got a quick trigger, a confident shot, meaning he's not going to record scratch when you get him a kick out to the corner or a kick out to the wing. He's going to shoot it, and he's going to make a lot of them. And then Jared Vanderbilt, who's another role player guy. So to me, does this make them title contenders? I think no way. I don't think they're a title contender realistically this year. But are they now drawing dead in a way that I think they were last week? Absolutely not. And if they are a team that can climb into the play-in, which I think is at this moment looks like their ceiling, they could be a first round upset team. They might even be a second round upset team. So I have a hard time buying 4 playoff series wins, but they're certainly a team that could get the right matchup and make some hay in the playoffs.
Their top 9 to 10 makes sense to me now, right? Like,
Really?
yeah, at least a little bit.
That's
Like
generous.
D'Angelo Russell, he's a 39%. He's shooting 39% from 3. Also will let it fly from 3-point range, and he'll let it fly from 30 feet out sometimes for better or worse, but he'll do it. You need that spacing, and like that stuff makes sense to me. But if you've got, for example, it's D'Angelo Russell, and then maybe it's Schroeder or Malik Beasley as the 2 guard, the other one comes off the bench as sort of a 6th man. LeBron, do you have Vanderbilt starting? Is it still Rui Hachimura? We'll see. I guess they'll toggle between those 2 or experiment. And then Anthony Davis. Should also mention that they traded Patrick Beverly to Orlando from Mo Bamba to be
Right.
their backup center. So they've got him coming off the bench too. And so no longer Thomas Bryant, but we'll get to that. Lonnie Walker, Austin Reeves, those guys coming off the bench. Like that's a top. I don't know if I mentioned Dennis Schroeder, but he's there too. And he's been good for them this year. So that's like a top 9 to 10 that I don't know that competes with like the Nuggets and the Suns and
Yeah.
all these other teams, but it makes sense to me. Like I could see like those are NBA players, right?
Mhm.
Like gone are the days of like Troy Brown Jr. starting now for the Los Angeles Lakers. And that's an improvement. Like
Right.
not to go too hard on Troy Brown Jr., but the difference between him and somebody like Jaron Vanderbilt is a big one, right? Like a
Right.
fringe NBA player versus a solid rotation player is a big difference. And so they've kind of just done that across the spectrum of their depth chart, which I think is important. Um,
It's hard for me, though. I'll say this, Wes. It's hard for me to think that as good as this trade is in terms of making them better, there's something else that just seems to be wrong. Like that Lakers team, Anthony Davis in
that
particular,
was
may
weird.
have just expired with LeBron. Like sometimes there's a shelf life, and then things expire. And I'm not sure, but they're a team that, to me, after the trade deadline or after the All Star break in particular, the first 2 or 3 weeks I think are going to be very important for us seeing is that a team that wants it. Are they a team that actually is going to come together and try to make a run? And I'm not sure the answer is going to be yes. We'll have to wait and see.
There's 2 stars now, despite what D'Angelo Russell thinks about himself. There's 2 stars now with the Lakers. Russell Westbrook's gone, and he is a sort of he gets treated like a star with all the attention and stuff like that, in that he was basically the fall guy for the entire first half of the season. When it wasn't going right, it was Russell Westbrook's fault, and you know, generally speaking here, but that's kinda what it felt like. He's gone now. Your scapegoat's gone. And so if these next 25 games don't go right for the Lakers and they still miss the play-in tournament or the playoffs, um, then you're kind of looking around and it's like, okay, is it LeBron's fault or is it Anthony Davis's fault? And LeBron, he's
Well,
obviously can't be traded this year, but if maybe he asks for a trade in the summer, or the alternative there is if you want to make huge sweeping changes to this team is yeah, maybe you can open up some cap space here and go for Kyrie Irving in the summer. That's a whole other thing, but maybe then you explore the Anthony Davis thing. That's because that's really the only other way to make some sort of huge sweeping changes because now you only have one of these future picks available too. So that's the other thing.
yeah.
In terms of where they're at, you mentioned their chances of getting in the playoffs. They're 2 games behind Portland now for the 10 seed, that final spot in the play-in tournament. The Warriors are 9, Minnesota's 8, New Orleans is 7. New Orleans made a small move that we'll get to here. And things like that. But I think the Lakers could feasibly climb up into the play-in tournament. I don't know.
It
They're right
helps.
now what?
It helps that there's 2 teams immediately above them in Utah and Portland that appear to be,
Yeah,
in Utah's case, throwing in the towel. In Portland's case, not getting better,
yeah.
which is kind of feels like throwing in the towel. So the teams that are ahead of them, Oklahoma City, okay, they're tough. Utah and Portland, nobody got better the way they got better.
Um, Quickly, the Timberwolves getting Mike Conley in there didn't feel like they really had to part with a whole lot other than a couple of second rounders, and you upgrade from D'Angelo Russell to Mike Conley. What do you think about that fit?
I actually like it. I mean, there was clearly something off with when everybody was healthy out there. Mike Conley's a leader. You saw the way the Utah Jazz players were talking about him.
Yeah,
They were not happy with the fact that he wouldn't be there. And I think Minnesota needed a leader. They needed somebody to come in and try to steady things. I don't love it for them long term because you've got Conley and Rudy Gobert, who both feel like they're on the downside of their career. Certainly Mike Conley, but maybe Gobert as well. But I do think that this provides a little bit of clarity in terms of what direction they're trying to go. So a strange trade. I think you got the lesser player in the trade, but maybe the better fit.
yeah.
And I think it'll be good for them this year.
Yeah, they needed a change at that point guard spot. It just felt like the D'Angelo Russell thing had run its course, and then Conley was really missed by the Jazz when he was hurt, and they went on that long losing streak, and then he came back and they started winning a few more games again. So there's something about him, like he just kind of gets people in order, and that's literally what the Timberwolves were out there looking for. So that's good. And then in terms of the Jazz, a little strange that, they're out there. We want a first round pick for Vanderbilt. We want a first round pick from Malik Beasley. We want a first round pick for Mike Conley. Well, they trade all 3 of them and they get 1 first round pick. Now, it's
Okay.
a good first round pick. It's top 4 protected from the Lakers. I know people have been wanting the unprotected picks from the Lakers, but top 4 is pretty light protections anyway. So you get a good first round pick out of it. And based on all the reporting around it, it never really sounded like they were going to get a first round pick for all those guys. And it really felt like that market was out there for Utah. So they get 1 pick, and then they get the rights to buy out Russell Westbrook, which is always fun.
Right. It does, though, feel like a team that Utah, for a while, early on in the year, was the #1 seed, this feel good story. They're now below 500. They're the 11 seed. They're outside the play in. And then a move like this makes it sound like they're content to miss the playoffs this year if that should happen.
We're going to speed round the rest of the deals that happened in the last couple hours before the trade deadline here on Locked On NBA. And then we'll talk about whether or not we have a new number one team in the NBA after all of everything just shook out. So we'll tell you who that is next on Locked On NBA. But first, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. This year, the only app that you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because of the #1 sportsbook in America. That's FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Download FanDuel now so you could bet Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You'll get the $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to point spreads to who's going to score a touchdown. The Super Bowl means prop bets. So if you think Philadelphia's A.J. Brown is going to score the first touchdown in the Super Bowl, you could bet on that. If you think Travis Kelce is going to have more than 7 catches, you could bet on that. All at FanDuel. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, super easy to use. And best of all, you can get paid your winnings instantly. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockedon to claim your no-sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, thanks again for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. All right, let's speed round through some of these other deals that came down right before the deadline. Let's talk about the New Orleans Pelicans, who got Josh Richardson from the San Antonio Spurs. The Pelicans has kind of felt like they were softly out there poking and prodding for a 3-and-D wing, a guy that they could run in maybe a closing 5 and things like that. Josh Richardson's name has been out there, it feels like, every year. What do you think about Josh Richardson in New Orleans as one of these smaller deals in the West?
New Orleans just has so many wings, and they add another one here. I mean, they just have a lot of guys that fit that 6'5" to 6'9" profile, and they get another one. I kind of like it. I think in today's NBA, you can use a bunch of those. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure how much this moves the needles for New Orleans, other than it just being another good piece. But they're going to have a logjam. I mean, they have Dyson Daniels, Herb Jones, Najee Martin. They have a lot of guys that I think you could play. So it'll be interesting to see whose minutes end up getting cut.
They moved 4 second-round picks to get him, but they also get off the Devontae Graham deal, which was money that they reportedly wanted to get off of. So all that's good. And Josh Richardson's playable. He's easy to kind of fit things around. I don't mind it. Let's talk about the Clippers, who made sort of a series of different moves. They send Reggie Jackson to Charlotte to get Mason Plumlee, who's going to be their backup center. Luke Kennard goes to the Grizzlies in a 3-way deal that gets them Eric Gordon, and then they get Bones Highland from Denver. So the Clippers were out there, hey, maybe we're a Fred VanVleet team, kind of looking at Kyle Lowry, Mike Conley, all these. And instead of doing that, it feels like they just sort of addressed this need by committee with 3, solid rotation players. But does this move the needle enough in the wake of the Kevin Durant trade?
I mean, comparing it to Kevin Durant, no. But I think what you have to look at.
Don't tell Bones Highland that, by the way.
Yeah. What you have to look at with this Clippers team is that they have survived this weird first 50 games of the season with Kawhi not playing very much. He's now looking as good as he has, in 2-3 seasons. He's really started to come on lately. I think the Bones move is an interesting one. It's more of a flyer. We'll see if he ends up playing this year or not. But he's a talented player that could maybe a change of environment really opens up his game. Eric Gordon's a very good player. We haven't seen a lot of him because he's been in Houston. Weird circumstance there, but he's a good player. I think the Clippers got a little bit better. It's going to be lost in the noise of the Kevin Durant move. But to me, I look at them and I go, yeah, they just have a lot of pieces still. And the players they gave up, I feel like they replaced them with new pieces.
Yeah, Eric Gordon's a good player for them. I don't know. I don't know that Plumlee's an option for them as a backup center. He probably is not going to be an every night guy, especially in the playoffs. But he's at least an option for them, where they didn't really have a backup option behind Zubac. And yeah, I guess Bones is a flyer for them, and we'll see how much playing time he gets. But I don't know. I don't know that this is really sort of like when you were kind of going in there thinking about a starting like traditional kind of point guard who can kind of table set and get Kawhi and Paul George off the ball a little bit more, which is apparently what they wanted. I don't think they did that, but they added some decent players here. It just feels like they have more decent players. The Clippers had a bunch of decent players, and then they have more decent players around Kawhi and PG. Let's talk about the Warriors. They traded James Wiseman to the Pistons for Sadiq Bey, but did not keep Sadiq Bey. Although to me, that was an ideal fit and made a ton of sense. Instead, they sent Bey to Atlanta, got a ton of second round picks back, and then they used all that stuff to go ahead and bring back their friend Gary Payton II from Portland. Portland no longer needed Gary Payton II because they went ahead and acquired Matisse Thybulle from the Philadelphia 76ers. So a bunch of names and a bunch of picks changing hands and a bunch of stuff. But let's talk about the Warriors giving up on their number 2 pick for essentially a bunch of second round picks that became a player that they had last year, right? That they let just walk away.
Right.
So this is a total give up on
Well,
James Wiseman by the Warriors.
Well, yes, but they did save 30 million. I mean, it is worth noting that somehow letting Gary Payton go and then bringing him back in this specific way saved the money, which is weird. But you are right. I mean, look, is there a bigger failure than James Wiseman being in the NBA for 3 seasons and going from the number 2 pick to second round, a collection of second round picks? That is a hell of a loss on investment from a number 2 overall pick, no matter how
Yeah.
you slice it. Nonetheless, if you ask me, are the Warriors better right now than they were 4 hours ago? My answer unequivocally is yes. Gary Payton is not a guy that fits every situation, but we know he fits the Golden State Warriors situation. So he is a guy that now adds another player to their playoff rotation. I think they have 7 players they can fully trust. Dante DiVincenzo being the other guy off the bench that to me, actually Jordan Poole as well. I'm going to give them 8 guys. They have 8 guys that I think you can trust in the playoffs. That might be all you need. So I think this was a good move for the Warriors.
Um, I'm all right. They didn't address the backup center spot. That I know JaMychal Green has been playing better for them.
So,
But that's not really going to be the answer there long term. They've experimented with starting Draymond at the 5 and bringing Kevon Looney off the bench and kind of addressing their center spot that way. I mean, that's ultimately what they do in the playoffs anyway, so that's okay. But I don't know. I thought last year they really caught lightning in a bottle with not just Otto Porter being healthy for them, but also Gary Payton being healthy. And that's the thing this year. Gary Payton has not been healthy. And that's what kind of kept him out of the NBA for a long time in the first place. So I don't know that you can count on him to be healthy. So that's where I'm at here. It just sort of felt like meh to me by the Warriors, and I don't really know that this moves the needle for them all that much because they still haven't addressed that thing that they need, which to me was a guy who was a big wing who can kind of toggle between the 3 and the 4 the way that Otto Porter did. I thought that maybe they think Kuminga is going to be that. I haven't gotten to the point where I trust Kuminga in big spots, but maybe they feel like they have no other thing in terms of Wiseman. Good for him, honestly. Like I don't blame the Warriors for not playing him. They're a team trying to win a championship, and he just clearly wasn't ready and never got the reps, and it was just hard to throw him in there. He's going to get reps in Detroit. Apparently, they had him really high in their draft board when he was coming out in 2020. So I think this is a good move for James Wiseman, and a change of scenery will be good for him. And we'll see. We'll see what happens with the rest of his career because we know it was going nowhere in Golden State.
yeah. Yeah, I don't have a lot of hope for James Wiseman, but at least it's a change of scenery, which was clear from a year ago that it's
Yeah.
what he needed. It was clear maybe 2 years ago, but very clear a year
Shouldn't
ago.
have drafted him in the first place.
Yeah.
That was the problem. The Bucks got Jay Crowder from the Nets for 5 second-round picks. Does Crowder move the needle for the Bucks at the top of the East?
Yes, I think. Look, he's a good player. He's a playoff caliber player, a championship caliber player, and you just need those guys. So, is it specifically to the Bucks? Not necessarily. Although we saw, he kind of fulfills that PJ Tucker role where he could play a small ball 5 or guard the other team center. When you start to talk about tooling up for the different teams in the East, well, of course, there's Joel Embiid you have to account for, and I think that the Bucks will find success in the playoffs using Jay Crowder on him and bringing help from the other players on the roster, from your Lopez, from your Giannis. So to me, it absolutely is going to be a very key small move that could be the difference for them in a tough playoff series.
Yeah, I don't know that Crowder was even worth 5 second-round picks, but this is the kind of move you make if you're on the cusp, right, of winning a
Right.
championship. If you have a chance, these are the kinds of moves that you make, and they have been looking at Jay Crowder for months now, and they get the deal done. And look, somebody else was offering 4 second-round picks, and Milwaukee came out and they offered 5, and they got their guy, and that's just what it takes. Maybe it's a slight overpay, but that's what you got to do if you have a chance to win the championship. The Celtics, meanwhile, also at the top of the East, they go ahead and get their guy, Mike Muscala from the Oklahoma City Thunder,
Their guy.
plus minus God, Mike Muscala. Put
That's
some
right.
respect on his name. I like this move for the Celtics. Kind of little bit move, gave up some picks. but makes sense behind Al Horford, Robert Williams III. Kind of gives him a little different look. It's fun.
It's fun. I wouldn't describe Mike Muscala as fun.
Fair
It's
enough.
funny that what's funny is that the Celtics tried to, rest their bigs last game just to see what they needed, and then they ended up making a move for Muscala, despite the fact that they beat the Philadelphia 76ers anyway. But yes, they bring in a guy like that. I don't know if this moves the needle for me as much. I think that this might just be a let's give Robert Williams and Horford some rest over the last 2 months
Yeah.
before they have a long playoff run.
Yeah, the Blake Griffin thing hasn't really worked, and so this is just sort of like another guy to give
Worked
out.
last night,
That's true, but
but
yeah,
you're right. But you're right.
yeah. Let's talk about your Nuggets. They get Thomas Bryant from the Lakers. They send Devon Reed over. There's no Bones Highland now in Denver. What does the depth look like for the Nuggets now, and how does Thomas Bryant change things for them at that backup center spot?
So the story of the Nuggets in the Malone era is that they like to play their starters a lot of minutes, more than just about anybody in the NBA, which means they play their no starters lineups more than anybody in the NBA. And this year, those lineups have been particularly bad. A lot of that is perhaps because of Bones Highland, who's had a pretty bad year, down year, missing his shots, not being a very impactful defensively. But some of that, I think, is that they could use a real presence inside. They brought in DeAndre Jordan, I think, more to be a locker room presence. And as the season has gone on, he's played less and less. They've tried Zeke Naji, who's more of a power forward, but they've tried him at the 5. I think Thomas Bryant solidifies a second unit now that will have an identity. They're going to want him to score. They're going to want him to play big. And I think they hope that he'll save their bench unit. I'm optimistic that that will be the case. It's a small move. He's probably gone in the offseason. He's on an expiring deal. But, I think it's a slight upgrade for Denver in an area that they needed, albeit one that'll be much more important in the regular season than the playoffs.
And don't think that we forgot about you, Toronto. We were just saving the best for last. Jakob Poeltl back home to the Toronto Raptors. They send Kem Birch and a protected 2024 first round pick and a couple of second rounders over to the Spurs. Jakob Poeltl ends up back in Toronto, and they get their center. So the big story here, not just Jakob Poeltl, is that they did not trade OG Anunoby. They did not trade Fred VanVleet. They did not trade Pascal Siakam. They added. We had heard this entire time, Adam, that hey, the 7-game trip is going to determine how we approach the deadline. They go 4-3 on that trip. Had they gone 3-4, I wonder if we just get the opposite of this. Like I thought, I wonder if they were being like super literal about this. It was like a coin flip almost. But Jakob Poeltl in Toronto, it just makes sense.
Doesn't make sense. It's funny to me that they were buyers and that they went and got a guy instead of giving players up. I don't know what they're hoping for. Maybe, when the KD news hit, the Kyrie news first and then the KD news hit, I do think it changed a lot of plans, and maybe no more so than for Toronto, who looked at it and thought, well, there's one less contender now in the Eastern Conference. Like, how many good teams actually are there? It's funny that the East has been better than the West all year. I think that flipped over the last week. The West now, to me, looks more dangerous. I don't know if I agree with them being buyers, picking up Jakob Poeltl. Is it really going to make enough of a difference for a team that's the 10 seed right now to like give themselves a chance in the playoffs? I don't think so, but they held on to some pretty good players that I'm sure we're going to be talking about once again come June and July.
Just felt like it was easier for them to not be sellers, right? Like this just felt like an easier route almost. It was like, let's just go get a center and then just play the rest of the season and see what happens. And we've seen them do this before. Like they were going to trade Lowry a couple years ago before the deadline, and then they didn't. And then they just signed and traded him over the offseason too. So that could still be there for Fred VanVleet. And like, I guess every team always wants OG and Anunoby. So that demand's not going to go away. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm with you though. I don't think it materially changes anything. They're so far back right now in the standings that they're probably not going to get out of the play-in just because of this either. But all right, let's just quickly wrap this up here. Flurry of moves. It feels like the landscape of the NBA has changed quite a bit. The Suns look like a powerhouse now. The Dallas Mavericks getting Kyrie to pair with Luka, that changes a lot of what's going on over there. You've got contenders adding little bits and pieces here and there. The Brooklyn Nets no longer a factor in terms of the playoffs at the top of the Eastern Conference. Do you have a new favorite in the NBA post NBA trade deadline?
I don't. Right now, I think my favorite. Well, I'll say I do, but not because of the trade deadline. I'm going with the team that's won 8 in a row, and the team that has been missing one of their key pieces all year, despite having the second best record, and that's the Milwaukee Bucks. I think they're the favorite. I think Boston is right there, and then I think Philadelphia, Denver, and I would just add now the Phoenix
Yeah.
Suns into that list of teams that is likely to be in the top tier by the time the playoffs roll around. I don't want to just say that I think Suns surpass all those teams because they're really good and proven as well. Very few teams make trades of this caliber at the deadline and it works out that quickly. So I'm not going to say it changed the structure of power. I'm just going to say a new contender has entered the chat.
I love it. I agree with you. I think that's a pretty clear top 5 too. I don't know that I would add anybody else in there. Now, the Grizzlies might have an issue with that. They added Luke Kennard at the deadline, which is nice.
They
But
need to win more than 2 of their last 10 games.
they
Like they
do.
they were in that tier for a while on the edges of it, but this last run has taken them out.
I agree. I'm glad you included Philadelphia in there. I know they've lost a couple in a row, but they're 7-3 in their last 10. They look awesome. They just look awesome. I think that would be that's a pretty clear top 5 group, and I also would have Milwaukee number 1, but this stuff literally changes every single week, almost every single night, and it feels like it's just gonna be those 5 sort of just trading places for the rest of the year unless something crazy happens.
Cleveland, though, Cleveland, Memphis, Dallas, maybe. I mean, Dallas is a mystery. Nobody really knows what to expect. And I think New Orleans is still a mystery as well. Just because we haven't seen Ingram
Yeah,
and Zion, I'm skeptical that it'll work. But like, that's another team that has played 0 games, at full
yeah.
strength so far this season.
And the
And then
Warriors, you gotta throw the Warriors in there.
lastly, the Warriors
Yeah.
are that team that you can never fully count out. I do think this last Curry injury has they would have been in my top tier prior to this, or at least in the tier with Denver and everybody else. The Curry injury is tough. We're getting late in the season. Like by the time he returns, there's not going to be that much runway for them to kind of coalesce. So they're in that third tier to me, but I would not be surprised if they make it to the second one by the time the playoffs start.
Yeah, they're a team that home court advantage really, really matters to them, evidently, based on their home and road record this year. And they're not going to get home court advantage. That's well, they could. I mean, I guess the number 4 seed
They
they're
still
only a
could.
game and a half out,
Yeah,
so
they still could.
yeah, they still could. But
Clay's playing
um,
phenomenal right now, by the
yeah,
way. I mean, Clay is really in his bag. And then I guess I didn't even mention the Clippers here, which to me again would be in that Warriors tier. They're starting to play well as well. They haven't done it long enough to really sell me on it, but
yeah.
they have the runway to sort of change my mind.
The Clippers have to win the championship for me to be sold on the Clippers experiment at this point. Like I just I won't trust it. All right. That'll do it for today's Locked On NBA. Your first listen every day. Now make your second listen game to game NBA every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. Adam, have a great weekend.
You as well.